Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Shook Sports Take podcast. Today is going to be about the NBA. So, this will be the first of 6 separate videos. I'm going to do it by division. And I'm just kind of going over my right out of the gate thoughts on every NBA team. Today is going to be the Atlantic Division. For those of you whom are not very good with the divisions, that will be the Boston Celtics, the Philadelphia 76ers, the New York Knicks, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Toronto Raptors. So it'll be those 5 today. And then sometime next week will be the one of the other 2 in the East. I'm not sure which one yet. But I just felt it would be a fun conversation to look at how each team starts the year. I'll do it probably another set halfway point, maybe the All-Star break, and then we'll do one right after the regular season, and we'll reevaluate just to kind of see how my opinion changes throughout different periods of the team, see which teams drastically improve, what changes follow. So that's kind of the goal of this first one, leading into the next 5. And yeah, let's get into it. We'll start with Boston. Looking at the Boston Celtics, it is obviously, there's no Jason Tatum on the floor. So they are going to be worse than they are when he is on the floor, right? So that seems pretty self-explanatory. But my point is I don't know if I expected them to be this bad at the start of the year. And you look at the roster and you see how different it is from just the team last year that lost to the Knicks in the playoffs. You don't see Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday. Those were the 2 big changes they made in the offseason. But they also lost both Al Horford and Luke Kornet. So this is the first time that Joe Mazzulla has coached a team without a floor spacing big man. And it seems to kind of impact the way he's been coaching, because we know Joe Mazzulla's philosophy almost last year was 3-pointers are where we're going to score. It is how you score the most points on a single possession. If we are the best in the league at shooting the 3, we're going to win the most games. And that philosophy won them a championship in 2024. So it has worked thus far, but now the floor spacing stuff, and I don't think Cade has been bad. He doesn't play that role, so it's a bit of an adjustment period in terms of coaching and play style for not only the Celtics but also for Joe Mazzulla. And their only real saving grace this far has been Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown has looked great. He's averaging 28 and 4 on pretty efficient numbers. The issue that they seem to have is that there is very little supporting cast, and that's not something you should have looked at Boston's roster and been able to predict, because you would have imagined that Peyton Pritchard stepping into a starting role would have been a big confidence boost for him, and seen his numbers rise up, or that Derek White without Jason Tatum would be pulling the weight as the second scorer in the team. But Derek White is averaging 14 and 5, shooting 27% from 3, which is probably the worst he's shot in the last 5 years. Derek White is very much struggling now. Do I think that continues? Probably not. I'm sure at some point this season Derek White will find his rhythm and the Celtics will start to play better. But until that happens, it's gonna be an ugly road. They're gonna lose some games that they shouldn't. They've already dropped to Philly twice. Which Philly's not a bad team. I'll get into them obviously in this video. But it's not a team that I would have just looked at and said they're probably going to beat Philly 2 out of the 3 times they play this season. They should have beaten them all 3 times they've played this season, but they, I digress. And then looking back, Peyton Pritchard hasn't really seemed to be great in a starting role. Peyton Pritchard seemed to benefit a lot last year from coming off the bench and being in a situation where Jaylen Brown or where Jason Tatum wasn't on the floor, and he can go out there and take the shots he likes. And he can't do that with Jaylen Brown as a starter. And for me, something that you can do to fix that is tell Peyton Pritchard, look, man, we prefer you coming off the bench. Maybe that is just what you're built to do, right? And I know no guy wants to hear that he is coming off the bench, but there's no shame in being a 6th man in the NBA, right? So I would push Peyton Pritchard back to being a 6th man. I'd let Anthony Simons start. I know Anthony Simons also is a guy that is going to need his shots in order to succeed. But if you look at the games that the Celtics have played really well, like that first game against Philly, like the win over Cleveland, Anthony Simons had a good game. He consistently impacts their ability to win when he plays well. And I just think that maybe Peyton Pritchard should be coming off the bench for Anthony Simons, and that it might flow better if if Joe Mazzulla makes that decision and the Celtics run it that way. Other than that, I mean, yeah, they just haven't really properly replaced Kristaps or Drew Holiday. Um, I think their backcourt is suffering from not having another elite defender alongside Derek White, who has, in fairness, minus his offensive struggles, has played great defense. So there is still an upside to Derek White being on the floor, even though his shots aren't falling. And, not only does that hurt the scoring of losing Porzingis and losing Drew Holiday's defense, it's hurting the team overall. But like I said, losing Luke Cornett and losing Al Horford, which probably didn't look like that big of a deal in the preseason, it is because of the way that Joe Mazzulla likes to run his offense. He likes a lot of space with the ability to give Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown opportunities to drive to a free lane or a less clogged lane without a big man sitting down there. And Kata's kind of occupying that space, not sitting in the corner like Cornette and Horford, and occasionally even Porzingis would do. And so it's definitely been a transition in their offense. Now, at the end of the day, I do think they'll be fine. They might be a low playoff team. They might find themselves in the play-in, but this was a kind of a reset year for the Celtics anyway, knowing that Jason Tatum at best makes it back come playoff time. So I still think they are going to find themselves in the postseason. It's going to be a lot uglier of a road there than it has been in the previous years. Then we move into what is the Brooklyn Nets. Now, I'm not going to sit here and just try to harp on all of the bad, because we know this Brooklyn team is not good. They have won one game, and it was the Indiana Pacers, who have been extremely injured, and they look really bad. Now, I will say from the very start, when they made the trade for Michael Porter Jr., I like Michael Porter Jr. I think he is, on his day, a great basketball player. The issue is that Michael Porter Jr. does not play his best game anywhere near consistent. And, Cam Thomas is the same way. And so bringing two of these guys who, yes, they could go off and give you 45 points on a night, but more often than not, they're going to find themselves in the 15 to 12 range on a bad night, or, an average of 17 to 20. And there's only one ball. So Michael Porter Jr. and Cam Thomas was never going to work in the same offense, and that is where they've seemed to be disconnected. Now, Michael Porter Jr. started really slow, but now Cam Thomas is hurt, and he's getting all the shots. He looks a lot better, but at the end of the day, this is never going to work. It's not. Both of them, I can't imagine that this lasts for more than one season. Maybe even at the deadline, I could see one of these two guys getting moved on from. I'm not sure who's going to take either of them, if I'm blatantly honest. Maybe a team looks and says they just need some more floor spacing and some shooting out of a wing, and they go get Michael Porter Jr. I don't think any teams are going to come in for Cam Thomas. I feel like there have been multiple opportunities that a team could have come in and taken Cam Thomas, and it's not happened because of the fact that they know Cam Thomas needs 20 to 30 shots a night to really produce in scoring numbers, unless he is hot. But now we're going to move on to some of the positives of Brooklyn, because there are quite a few. I think Nick Claxton has continued to show that he can be a pretty valuable asset. He's a really solid shot blocker. He can get to his spots down low occasionally, and he is a fairly decent piece. Probably not one that Brooklyn currently need, because they're not challenging for anything, and it's, I could see him offering something to another team if Brooklyn needed to find themselves pieces. And then you have Noah Clowney, who's looked really good. He's scoring much more efficiently this season. He's shooting pretty well, and I think, again, he's only 21, so Noah Clowney is someone you look at and say, okay, this is a guy that can help us in 3 years when we are starting to get better. And then you have rookie Igor Demine. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I apologize if I'm not, but he's shown flashes of being a very solid NBA level player. Now, his numbers don't look great, but from the few times I've watched Brooklyn play this season, he has his moments where he can be pretty effective, and he's gonna be able to probably run an offense in Brooklyn at some point in the next 2 or 3 years. Now, the other great thing that Brooklyn have is they got 4 draft picks from Mikal Bridges. They have plenty of draft capital. And think about what Oklahoma City did with all of that draft capital. Now, admittedly, that was like 8 picks, and they still have picks from the Paul George and Russell Westbrook trades today. But it just goes to show that draft capital in the NBA is extremely valuable if you draft right. Now, do I trust Brooklyn to draft right? I'm going to be honest, not really. The history is there that they do not draft very well. But I do think that there's a situation where we look at this Brooklyn team in 2 to 3 years and say, yeah, they are not rolling. They were not playing well back in 2025, but all of the moves that they made, they moved on from Michael Porter Jr. Maybe they moved on from Cam Thomas. Maybe they drafted really well, and this is how we got to a playoff contending team. And they haven't seen a team like that since they went all in and came up short with Kyrie, KD, and Harden. But I do think that there is a future, and honestly, a fairly bright future out in Brooklyn if they can just do all the right things in terms of what the GM needs to get going in Brooklyn. And it'll be a time will tell story, and that is really where you find yourself. Us to the New York Knicks, who struggled. They found themselves winning their first 2 and then losing 3 straight in some pretty ugly losses. They did not score well against Miami. They couldn't find enough to beat the Milwaukee Bucks, and then they almost got blown out if it wasn't for a late third quarter and fourth quarter resurgence against Chicago, which ultimately fell short anyway. And it felt quite obvious that Mike Brown's had instilled the ideas of what he wanted this offense to look like, which is much less isolation for Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, but to keep them just as involved. And by doing that, you want to get Towns and Brunson more touches, but for less amounts of time. And I feel like early on, the offense was too focused on that. Brunson and Towns were not really trying to take their man on, not going at their defenders, because they thought that they were not trying to hold the ball too long like Mike Brown wanted. But then the other guys getting the ball were thinking, okay, well, I have to get Jalen and Towns as many touches as possible. But since the loss to the Bulls, it's looked much different. The offense looks very, very good. I think they're on a 5-game win streak now. They play Orlando tonight, and they look a lot different, man. Towns has been very aggressive at getting to the basket, using his size to drive at defenders over this last 4 or 5 game period. And it looks much different. He's playing bully ball. Now, the 3 is still not falling as consistently as you would have hoped if you were a Knicks fan. But the offense is playing much better. They're being much more fluid in their movements. They're swinging the ball. It's some of the best offense I've seen the Knicks play, because even though they were scoring a lot last season and the year before, it wasn't pretty. It was a lot of Jalen Brunson getting the ball, putting his head down, and figuring out a way to score. Or, in the playoffs, there was a lot of stretches where Towns was touching it every time, and once it was in Towns' hands, nobody else is getting the rock. So the basketball has been much more pretty, even, is the way you should put it. And it's been effective. Not to mention that another bright spot to that, the basketball being so much more fluid, is the fact that the Knicks are very good shooting from the corners. They might be the best in the league. I don't know if that is 100%, but 100% correct. But shooting the corner 3, Mikal Bridges is 62%. OG Anunoby is 52%. Deuce McBride and Landry Shamet have shot really, really well from the corners as well. And so the movement and the effort to get to those spots has shown fluidly through this Mike Brown offense, and it is making the Knicks pretty deadly because the defense was there from the jump. The defense has been really, really good. Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby are killing it on the perimeter. Deuce McBride when he comes, Landry Shamet when he started or if he's coming off the bench. And the rotations, they're not getting caught in these pick and roll situations with Brunson and Towns anymore, which is something that got them annihilated in the playoffs in that Pacer series. And when Mitchell Robinson is on the floor, Mitchell Robinson really might be an X factor in this team. Aside from Jalen Brunson, what he does on offense, but Mitchell Robinson gives the Knicks so many extra possessions on the glass, but at the same time, he dominates teams in the post. It is very difficult to do anything around the rim when Mitchell Robinson is on the floor, and he is so effective on the other side with that on the glass that Towns has been able to get open into a lane that is less congested because guys are more focused on, okay, I got to make sure Mitchell Robinson is not in a position to get this offensive rebound, that they're actually putting themselves out of position, giving Towns space to get to the hoop, giving Brunson space to get down into the lane. And it has made the Knicks offense very effective. So Mitchell Robinson, if he can just stay healthy, they're really trying to manage this ankle issue. He didn't play the other night against the Grizzlies, so I think he will play tonight against the Magic. But he makes them very dynamic in the sense that he is such almost a potent figure to have to think about on offense and defense. But yeah, man, and the bench has been fantastic scoring the ball. Jordan Clarkson looks great. He started a little slow, but in this game of winning streak, he's been superb. Deuce McBride has continued to do the things he did last year, shooting the three really well. Landry Shamet, whether he's started or come off the bench, has looked really good. Josh Hart is taking a role off the bench. We know the energy Josh Hart brings to the Knicks. And then even Gershon Yabusele, who's played played less minutes than I thought he would have, has been effective. Early in the season, Huck Porty found himself starting opening night to match up with Cleveland, or maybe it was it opening night? Yeah, it would have been against Cleveland. He found himself starting that game. He played really well when he started. And Tyler Kolek, when he's found minutes, has looked good, very creative, very willing to get downhill. So the depth of this Knick team, I know now it's been cut more to a 9-man rotation than the original 10, but they do have support. Mikal Bridges is not having to play 40 minutes a night. Neither is OG Anunoby, neither is Jalen Brunson, and they're still winning games when the bench. They're not finding themselves at deficits when the bench goes in. It's been really good for the starters to be able to actually rest throughout the season and not be pushed so far to their limits, which is the biggest criticism. Is probably the reason Tom Thibodeau got fired in the end. So the conclusion with the New York Knicks is that I really do still expect them to be the top 2 seeds one of the top 2 seeds in the East. They're probably a lot of people's favorite to come out of the East, and if the offense can keep playing the way it is with matching how the intensity of the defense, I would be surprised if the Knicks weren't the 1 seed, and they might just be my favorites to come out of the East. Moving into the Philadelphia 76ers, who sit at 7-4 in what is a weak East. We've talked about how weak the East is multiple times because of injuries. I think they really could make some noise, completely dependent on the health of Joel Embiid. I have no doubts that they will be that 5 or 6 seed, one of those last 2 seeds in the playoffs, because of Tyrese Maxey. Tyrese Maxey is elite. His ability to score the ball at both levels, whether it's getting downhill to the basket or stepping it back, finding himself moving threes, standstill threes. It just doesn't matter. Off the dribble, Tyrese Maxey is pure. He's averaging 32 and 8. Just playing at one of the most efficient levels I've seen all season. But you combine that with the way that VJ Edgecombe has started the season. He's averaging 15 and 5 rebounds. I didn't see VJ Edgecombe hitting the ground running like this. Kelly Oubre and Quentin Grimes are continuing to be a factor each and every night, which is something a lot of people said. Quentin Grimes, when the 76er team was really injured at the end of last season, really stepped it up. I think for a period of time where he's probably averaging close to 23 points a night, and people did not think that was going to continue when it came to the season. Of course, he's not averaging it at that level, but there is any given night that the Sixers need somebody to add a bit of scoring, they can go to Quentin Grimes and he's going to have a big night. That's how it feels when you watch the 76er team. And Kelly Oubre, again, been super consistent. he on another night, if he gets hot, he needs to pull some weight. They can go to Kelly Oubre. They can rely on him. So they have reliable pieces that are consistently giving them 12 to 15 points a night. But then when they're asked to step up because, maybe Maxi's struggling a little bit or VJ's not having a great night, they can go to those two. Or Embiid is managing his injury again tonight. That's where Andre Drummond is stepping in. Andre Drummond has been very impactful on the glass, which they're not expecting Andre Drummond to come in and give them, the 18 points a night that Joel does in limited minutes. But Drummond, when Embiid's not out there, continues to clean up on the boards. I think he's close to a double-double right now. He's been very, very important in filling the void that they've had over the last few years when Embiid's been out with injury, and they're managing that injury well. Embiid has not played a crazy amount of minutes, but he's playing enough to where he's still able, when he is playing, to be effective, and then he's taking a night off. And he is starting to step it up again. Joel Embiid, when he did play last year, wasn't great. And, you think of Joel Embiid and you think of the MVP form that he was playing on. And you can start to see that coming back more and more. The more amount of games he's starting to play, the more comfortable he's getting back in this offense. And Jared McCain just got healthy. We haven't seen him play. Now, he hasn't hit a shot yet. He is 0 for 8 on the year, but he's only played, I think, maybe a total of 30 minutes. So once he gets fully healthy, Jared McCain is going to add to this team. I have to assume it'll be off the bench, which is kind of unfortunate because when he got into that starting role last year in the short amount of time that Tyrese Maxey missed, he looked great. And it's kind of a shame because I would like to see a way for them to play together. I just don't think it's going to happen. So McCain might slot into the sixth-man role, but maybe they do drop Grimes. I'm not sure how they end up playing it, but there is a lot to like about this 76er team. I think there's a lot of scoring options, scoring outlets, and I think it's all coming together really nicely. I will give a big shout-out as well to Trendon Watford, who has been very, very impactful to start this year in moments when he's been asked to step up. Against Toronto, he went for 20, 17, and 10. It was really, really impressive. He has been consistently a factor in games in the minutes that he's played, and that's really the story of the early season so far for the 76ers is when they need a guy to step up, they have the guys to do that. So the load isn't just on Joel Embiid. The load's not just on Tyrese Maxey. And now the only question I do have for them is what exactly happens when Paul George gets healthy? Because you are paying him too much money to not have a role, but he isn't what Paul George used to be. We all know this now. Do I think he can be better than he has been the last couple of years? I think he can. I think there is still a factor Paul George can play in this Philadelphia team. I just don't think it's a primary ball handler role. I think they have to accept that he needs to now play more of a spot-up three-point shooter role because he is still pretty lethal on a good night from behind the arc. And he is still pretty creative getting down to the baseline and putting in some work and knocking down a shot here and there. He can still be fairly impactful in this team. It's just going to be in a much more limited role than it has been or that he would like it to be. But overall, I really do think that this Philly team will be straight into the playoffs. They won't have to fight to the play-in. And if Embiid's healthy, man, do not be surprised if there's a sneaky conference final run. Because Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid both getting hot is not something any team in the NBA is going to want to have to face off against. We'll cap off the Atlantic Division with the Toronto Raptors, who have been pretty solid to start the year. I think they sit at 5-5 last time I checked. They might be 6-5 now or 5-6. I think they've played another game since. But really the story for the Toronto Raptors is that they are going to be competing with anyone on any given night simply off the fact that Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, and RJ Barrett are all very, very good scorers. They're all averaging close to 20 points. I think Brandon Ingram and RJ are averaging over that or exactly 20, and then Scotty's at like 19.9 or something super, super close. So the Raptors are very efficient with those three. Those three are playing well. When one of those three don't play well, that's when they start to drop games. There was a night the other night that Scotty and Brandon Ingram couldn't get their shots to fall, and they got manhandled. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic in the fact that if those three are having a good night, all three of them having a good night, they probably beat a lot of teams, a lot of good teams. But if it isn't there, and one of them, or even if two of them aren't playing well, you can see that they're not going to win the game. But they're going to be competitive with everyone. They're going to beat a lot of the teams they should beat. They're probably going to lose to a lot of the better teams, both the East and the West. But it is a sign that just improving the pieces around these three, I don't know how much longer we'll see Brandon Ingram play at this high of a level. But as long as they have guys that can step up around them, this team in 2 years could be pretty dangerous. Now, in terms of the guys stepping up around them, Immanuel Quickley is playing okay. He's averaging 15 and 6 assists. I feel like the story with Immanuel Quickley has always been, can he shoot the three well? And in 2023, he shot it at just around 40%. Which is really, really effective. And he was playing some of his best ball in New York before he was traded for OG Anunoby. And now he's shooting it, I think he's shooting it at 34%. And it's just about seeing that three-point shot fall more consistently, and can he be more creative? Because there's nights that Quickly goes out there and he'll dish out 11, 12 dimes, and the Raptors win because he is creating for his teammates. But it just doesn't happen every night, which, I'm not expecting him to average double-digit assists throughout the season, but can he continue to be creative, open the floor, open the space for these guys, find them when they are open, and see what impact he can have on this offense by being the primary ball handler and settling for not scoring as many points. Jakob Poeltl is another guy that is still effective. Obviously, his numbers have come way down than they were last year. He was averaging almost 18 points a game last season. It might have been more than that, but there was certainly a period where he was consistently their top scorer on the night. But that team was very injury riddled last season, and Barnes missed a lot of time and Quickly barely played. And I think RJ missed some minutes, some games as well. And it was on Poeltl's shoulders to be the scorer, and now it's more about how impactful can he be on the boards and on the defensive side of the ball. And he's still going to be a solid piece. The one that really hurts when you watch this team is that I felt like there was certainly a period of last season where Grady Dick showed flashes of not being a superstar, but being an extremely well-respected role player in the NBA, and now it just isn't consistent at all. And it sucks because Grady Dick has a lot of likable things about him. He's a pretty talented three-point shooter. There's a lot of hustle with a kid like that, and he's not the worst defender. He's a pretty solid perimeter defender, but it just isn't consistent enough in terms of scoring for how many shots he tries to take. He is not very effective getting into the lane and finding finishes around the rim. And so, yeah, sure, you're still going to have the nights where he goes for 18 points and really contributes to a win. But if he's not hot from beyond the three-point line, he doesn't really add that much to this Toronto team. And it's really unfortunate because I do really like him. And I think if he could just find some consistency, he will be a pretty solid piece. And it just doesn't really look like it's going to happen, which is really unfortunate. And then they have some other guys like Jonathan Mogbo, who has been fairly effective here and there, but again, just the consistency isn't there. So I still think they are probably 2 years away from really making something happen. And in that amount of time, I don't know if all three of these big scorers in Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, and RJ Barrett will still be in Toronto. But that being said, this season I have to imagine that they find themselves high playing at best. Maybe, just maybe, if they really start to string some games together and Brandon Ingram and RJ and Scotty can all stay really hot, maybe they find themselves in that very last playoff spot. But it would be an extremely unlikely scenario. Low to high play-in at best, and I have to assume that they won't be involved in this year's postseason. But you know, they're full of surprises, and again, like I said, they can beat a lot of teams on any given night. So they're not a team to sleep on, that's for sure. And I wouldn't be dumbfounded if they were part of the postseason. I think it's unlikely, however. But that was the Atlantic Division. Yeah, there'll be another one out next week. Another team or another division from the Eastern Conference. I haven't decided which one yet, but I appreciate all of you who have listened. And yeah, feel free to let me know what your opinions on some of these teams are and who your favorites out of the East are. Thank you for watching.